Where were you born and grew up?
Okay, I was born in England in 1940. In fact, I was born in the Midlands about 3 days after France surrendered to Germany. My father was a conscientious objector. He didn't fight, but was not a total pacifist, and so he worked with Italian prisoners of war during the war. And of course, he came into contact with the Quakers, the Religious Society of Friends, who were pacifists. So after the war, that would be 1945, excuse me, when I was about 5, my sister was 4. My mother and he joined the Religious Society of Friends. And so I was brought up as a Quaker, first of all in the Midlands until I was about 13. And then I was sent away to boarding school, Quaker boarding school in York, Bootham School, York. And I stayed there till 1819, and then I went to university at Bristol. And then at the age of 22, I got a scholarship or a fellowship to McMaster. And in those days, believe it or not, it was easier to get the Canadian equivalent of a green card than a student visa, because don't forget, I mean, you're very much part of the Commonwealth. Huge numbers of people from Britain had gone to either Canada or Australia or New Zealand after the war. So I was one of the, it was starting to come to an end, but very much. And the funny thing is, as soon as I got off the boat, and I can tell you it was September 17th, 1962, in Quebec City, and I hadn't expected it to happen. And suddenly I realized I'm not going back. I don't want this. This is a new world, and I've always felt that way. And I've been back, obviously, on sabbatical and to finish my degree, but I have never, ever, ever in my, now what is it, 58 years in North America, ever thought of myself as going back to England. I mean, I'm not ashamed of being English. I'm fully aware that my accent, everybody thinks I'm just off the boat. I go back to England and nobody says to me, "Oh my goodness, you live in North America." I do say tomato, but I did an MA in Canada, and then some PhD work in the States, and then I got a job in '65 at the University of Guelph, which is in Ontario. And there were a lot of places like England were founding new universities, like the University of Sussex and University of Lancaster and that sort of thing. And the same was happening in Canada, particularly in Ontario. And so University of Guelph was a new university, just started that year. But it was a bit odd because it was founded, there was the Agricultural College, the Vet College, and Domestic Science already there, which had been there for 100 years. And so, in fact, in my first year or two, I would often have students whose grandparents or great-grandparents had actually met at Guelph, one of them doing agriculture and another of them doing home economics or domestic science. So it was a very much a family sort of thing. And I stayed there for 35 years teaching philosophy. And I think I would have stayed, but in 2000, I just turned 60. And so in 2005, I would have been 65, and still they had compulsory retirement. So I would have had to retire. Well, I did what you're not allowed to do anymore. I married one of my students who was significant, a great deal. Let me put it this way. When I first met her in my class, I was 41 and she was 19. Now, I should say, she's just down the road, in the bedroom, just further down the house. And we've been married for over 35 years. So, it's a good end to the story. But, and I should say, by the way, that with this lockdown, we look at each other and say, isn't it good that we like each other so much? But it did mean that I had 3 young children, and there was no way I could afford to retire. So when I was offered a job in, dear God, Florida, for Christ's sake, Florida. 6 months later, we've got a house in Florida, and we're looking at each other and saying, what on earth are we doing in Florida? But of course, we've got 3 kids. So I don't know whether you've got kids, but the thing is, if you've got children, you can't stay home. you've got to get out there, go to school. You have to be part of the community. And here we are 20 years later, and I am now finally retiring. I turn 80 next month, and I'm retiring in August, and I'm terrified. But there you go.